Hello everyone. Welcome to the Lightning Ball channel. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, please do so and activate the notification bell. Your support fuels my continued efforts. In the upcoming TenSura Volume 22, although the specifics of the plot remain unclear, one aspect that is certain to appear is the battle between Guy and Velzard, along with the process of Guy freeing Velzard from the ultimate dominion and restoring her sanity. Of course, Rimuru and Seal's assistance from the shadows will undoubtedly play a crucial role in this scenario. In this episode, we will boldly predict how this part of the story might unfold. Naturally, we'll first review the events from the web novel and then make some predictions based on potential changes in the light novel. So, let's get started. First, in the web novel, after Veldora won his battle against the Shuriform de Gruel, he also accidentally destroyed Luminous City with his forest-ravaging powers, forcing him to flee back to Rimuru. After replenishing his magicule supply, Rimuru sent him to the northern battlefield. In the light novel, however, Veldora was dispatched to Sarian to protect the Divine Tree. In the web novel, the northern battlefield was in a state of chaotic turmoil. The specifics of the battle won't be detailed here, but if you're interested, we can make a separate video to cover it. Overall, the situation was highly unfavorable for Primordial Red Guy. First, Chloe's body was taken over by Monus Lucia, a fake Lucia created by Velda. Additionally, Lucia gained control over the Scorched Dragon Velgrynd and Frost Dragon Velzard through the power of the Lord of Justice. However, Veldora's timely arrival alleviated some of the pressure on Guy, and Velgrind's ultimate skill, Lord of Charity, was transformed into Lord of Flame God thanks to Seal's help. Yes, in the web novel, Velgrind's transformation occurred later in the timeline, during the later stages of the Tenma Great War, which is a significant difference from the light novel. Unsurprisingly, this alteration triggered suspicion in fake Lucia, who had taken over Chloe's body. To clarify, this was not the real Lucia but a replica created by Velda using a memory orb that contained Lucia's memories. To truly resurrect the original Lucia, they would need to recover her lost skill, Lord of Wisdom. However, Velda replaced Lord of Wisdom with Lord of Justice in this Lucia, turning her into another Monus. For the sake of clarity, we will refer to her as Fake Lucia. Fake Lucia understood that the changes occurring in Velgrynd could only result from either the evolution or devolution of abilities, which would explain the disappearance of the angelic ultimate skill. Although this was an extremely rare occurrence, fake Lucia didn't dwell on it too much, knowing that she still had control over the strongest true dragon, Frost Dragon Velzard. Moreover, now that she had acquired the body of the strongest hero, Chloe, she had become the most powerful being. Fake Lucia's original body, however, remained protected by the impenetrable castle guard in the Star Palace. As long as her real body wasn't destroyed, Lucia was confident in her victory. The battle then turned into Velgrynd fighting Velzard, buying Guy time to find a way to free Velzard from control. Meanwhile, Veldora bravely faced off against the possessed Chloe, the very hero who had once sealed him away. However, before the fight could even begin, Veldora hesitated. Chloe held a weapon in her hands, while he was empty-handed. Having learned his lesson from their encounter 3 centuries ago, Veldora knew he had to be more cautious this time. Just as Veldora was pondering his dilemma, a sword flew towards him. It was Guy's god-level sword, the World, one of the strongest swords in existence. A familiar yet somewhat unfamiliar voice instructed Veldora to use the weapon. When he turned towards the voice, he saw a striking red-haired beauty, her ample chest and slender waist accentuating her firm, rounded hips. This was none other than a feminized version of Guy. Veldora froze in shock, asking if this really was Guy. Guy confirmed with a smirk, explaining that he could change both his gender and appearance at will. When in battle, he took on a masculine form, while in analytical mode, he appeared feminine. With Velgrynd stalling Velzard, Guy decided that focusing all his abilities on intelligence processing to release Velzard from control was the best approach, thus assuming a female form. Guy then reminded Veldora not to lose the battle. Veldora, regaining his confidence, declared that he had always wanted to fight hero Chloe seriously and promised to give it his all this time. Guy nodded at Veldora's renewed resolve and shifted his attention back to his own battlefield, turning towards Velzard. Steeling himself, Guy activated his full power, focusing all his energy on calculation, and began to launch a focused attack, attempting to erode Velzard's core and free her from control. At that moment, as Velzard battled fiercely against Veldrynd, she couldn't help but feel both surprise and pride at her sister's growth, but also frustration at being hindered by her. Defeating Guy and making the demon her subordinate was an obstacle Velzard needed to overcome. Therefore, Velzard decided to unleash her hidden ultimate skill, Lord of Envy. This was originally her trump card reserved for facing Guy, but by using it now, it could no longer be considered a trump card. However, under the control of Lord of Justice, Velzard failed to realize such a simple fact. With only a brief moment of hesitation, Velzard released Lord of Envy. Thanks to her Lord of Flame god, Velgrynd, while unable to match her sister Velzard in terms of raw magicule amount, was more efficient in using it. This allowed Velgrynd, for the first time, to fight on equal footing with Velzard. Furthermore, she didn't have to worry about running out of magicules, as through the Soul Corridor, Rimuru could continuously supply her with energy whenever she requested it. Even though Velgrynd had consumed a significant portion of her magicules when evolving her ultimate skill into Lord of Flame God, they were quickly replenished via the Soul Corridor. From Velgrind's perspective, there was no reason for her to lose. Indeed, Rimuru had essentially become a massive battery for her. I imagine that in Volume 22 of the light novel, Rimuru will also be secretly providing infinite energy to both Velgrynd and Veldora. After all, in the light novel, Rimuru has already mastered boundless, infinite energy. But Velgrynd was still somewhat naive. She soon noticed a change in Velzard's expression, a telltale sign that she was about to unleash her trump card. Yes, Velzard was preparing to use her most powerful move, Whiteout Absorb, a technique that combined three of her abilities, Cessation Lost, Solidification, and Absorb, into one devastating attack. Seeing this, Velgrynd pushed her abilities to the maximum and unleashed her own most powerful move, Cardinal Acceleration. The red and white beams of light clashed in the sky, causing the northern lands to tremble violently. Ice and fire collided, but soon the blizzard began to dominate, turning everything around into a vast white expanse. The victor was Velzard, thanks to her hidden ultimate skill, Lord of Envy. Velgrind's abilities were all downgraded, and Velzard had restored an incredible amount of energy. The effect of Lord of Envy was to weaken the opponent's abilities and absorb their energy. Please note, this is the current description of Lord of Envy in the web novel, but how it will be portrayed in the light novel remains to be seen. Faced with Velzard, Velgrynd, whose abilities had been weakened, no longer had any chance of victory. Velzard coldly remarked that although Velgrynd had made impressive progress, which was commendable, the final outcome would not change. Indeed, in Velzard's eyes, Velgrynd posed no threat. However, Velgrynd remained unfazed and calmly stated that there was no need for her to defeat Velzard. Although her abilities had been downgraded, her acceleration power was completely unaffected. In this situation, even if her powers disappeared entirely, it wouldn't matter. Velgrynd had focused all her strength on acceleration, operating at full speed. The degradation of her abilities and defeating Velzard were unimportant. What mattered was buying Guy enough time to complete the erosion process, and she had achieved that goal. Velgrynd prayed, hoping that Guy would quickly break Velzard's control. At the same time, Guy broke through the layers of mental barriers and finally reached the depths of Velzard's mind. Now, Guy was likely still in his female form, but for simplicity's sake, I'll refer to him in his male form. Guy exhaled a sigh of relief and carefully said that it had been difficult to find Velzard. This was Velzard's mental domain, where even a wrong word could trigger an emotional outburst from Velzard in reality. Velzard, upset, demanded to know what Guy was doing there, accusing him of coming to mock her. Guy calmly replied that he had come to bring her back. However, even this cautious response provoked Velzard. A long time ago, it had always been this way. Guy would speak to Velzard with that lofty attitude, and Velzard would unconditionally follow his instructions. Velzard began venting her frustration, complaining that Guy had never considered her feelings and that she had always been the one to endure, over and over again. She reminded Guy that she, too, had been entrusted with the mission of guiding the world by Veldora. She had been monitoring Guy to prevent him from going out of control, but she could no longer tolerate it. Velzard continued to vent her grievances, noting that her sister Velgrynd had already found the man she loved, and Veldora was wreaking havoc in the world freely. Why, then, was she the one who had to keep enduring? Just because her older brother Veldora had recognized Guy as the only person besides him who could destroy the world, she had no choice but to stay by Guy's side, constantly holding back. Worse still, Guy had always kept her at a distance, which was something she could never forgive. Of course, Velzard's resentment didn't end there. This time, it also involved that slime. Velzard couldn't understand why Guy had chosen to help that slime, when they could have simply followed Velda and continued living peacefully in the north. She believed her brother Velda could never be defeated. Instead of watching Guy be killed by Velda, she thought it would be better to end this relationship with her own hands. Velzard vented all her pent-up frustrations, her intense resentment manifesting as blades of energy aimed at Guy. However, Guy didn't dodge. Instead, he stood firm, accepting all of Velzard's anger without resisting, as if he wanted to bear the full brunt of her dissatisfaction. Velzard wasn't finished yet. She expressed how Guy had even come to acknowledge humans, yet had never acknowledged her, who had been always by his side. She pounded Guy's chest with her fists, questioning what she meant to him. Despite all her efforts to gain his recognition, it seemed she was nothing in his eyes. Velzard, in her frustration, hit Guy repeatedly. Guy sighed, calling Velzard a silly little fool. He told her that he had always recognized her, that she had been his only partner all along. Velzard, taken aback, responded that she didn't want to be treated as someone inferior. Guy, in a calm voice, told her that if she had grievances or hated him, she should just say so and not waste so much energy on something trivial. He then added, almost nonchalantly, that losing to Veldora had been a long time ago, and next time, he was sure he would win. Hearing this, Velzard stopped hitting Guy and rested her face against his chest. She muttered that Guy was the foolish one, as he could never defeat Veldora. Guy responded casually, saying that one person alone might not be able to, but he was confident that Velzard would stand by his side to face any formidable foes. Velzard, stunned by the arrogant words coming from Guy, said she really hated him. But after a long string of complaints, she reluctantly admitted that despite everything, she liked him the most. Filled with all her long-suppressed feelings, Velzard confessed her love to Guy. Guy, in his usual unruffled manner, simply replied that he knew. Velzard, clearly unsatisfied with such a dry response, complained that Guy was both arrogant and insufferable. Guy just smiled, saying that this was who he really was and that it proved his true self. Velzard pouted, saying that by Guy's logic, she was just troubling herself over nothing. Guy nodded, agreeing that this was exactly how he saw it. Velzard, utterly speechless, said that at the very least, Guy could have denied it and comforted her. Guy, a bit exasperated, remarked that it was too much of a hassle, especially considering that the real-world battle was still raging on. If they didn't hurry and break the control over Velzard, Velgrynd would soon be in danger. Indeed, Velgrynd was barely holding on, relying on the energy transmitted through Rimura's soul corridor. But if the battle dragged on and that energy supply was cut off, Velgrynd would be defeated. Velzard still couldn't shake her annoyance, remarking that Guy was as unkind to her as ever. Guy replied that she was his partner, and when it came to family, there was no need to be overly gentle. Though said offhandedly, Guy's words caught Velzard off guard, and the term family echoed in her mind. Realizing the weight of Guy's statement, her face flushed as she hurriedly pulled away from him. Guy, oblivious to her reaction, calmly stated they should leave this place as soon as possible. Although slightly irritated by Guy's demeanor, Velzard felt reassured by his usual calmness, and the uncertainty in her heart vanished, replaced by rational clarity. She admitted that breaking free from Velda's control seemed nearly impossible. Guy, however, offered a solution. If she used the demonic power to neutralize the angelic power, it might work. His confidence in Velzard's strength gave her the determination to meet his expectations. Velzard then began fighting against the chains of control within her soul, sparking a struggle between her two ultimate skills. Under her intense willpower, Lord of Envy started to erode Lord of Patience, but the latter's high defensive power resisted with all its might. Seeing this, Guy decided to intervene, attempting to replicate a power he'd observed before, alternation, the skill used to evolve Velgrind's abilities. Just then, Velzard heard the voice of the world, offering her the choice to unify her ultimate skills, Lord of Patience and Lord of Envy, by activating alternation. Realizing this must be the help Guy had mentioned, Velzard accepted without hesitation. In an instant, her two ultimate skills unified and evolved into the even more powerful Lord of Divine Ice, and at that moment, the chains of control binding her were shattered. As the new power surged through her, both Velzard and Guy were taken aback. Velzard marveled at her skill having reached the same level as Velgrynd, and also at the strength Guy had given her, one that would forever prevent anyone from binding her. Meanwhile, Guy was completely bewildered. He'd only tried to mimic that skill to release Velzard from control, but the result seemed far beyond a mere ability alteration. Though Guy had indeed managed to mimic and trigger alternation, it felt as if someone else had anticipated his actions and taken control of the outcome. Velzard felt a surge of happiness, realizing that, together with Guy, there was no opponent they couldn't overcome, just as they had now. Guy, in his usual arrogance, nodded and stated that it really was that simple. Well, we all know the one actually in control here was Seal, but proud Guy claimed the credit for himself. Naturally, with her senses restored, Velzard also understood that Velda wasn't truly Veldonava. I'll stop here with the web novel's events for now, but that's the general process in the story. So, returning to our predictions for Volume 22, it's almost certain that Rimuru and Seal, hidden behind the scenes, transcending time and space, will appear to help release Velzard from control. In fact, since Seal could use Lord of Justice, she could alter Velzard's status directly, similar to how she helped Leon and Zelario. But there's a catch. Velzard's Lord of Patience has high resistance, and may not readily accept Seal's command. Therefore, approaching her through Guy might be the only way to gain Velzard's consent. So, I think the scene where Guy enters Velzard's inner world is very likely to appear in Volume 22. Now, the next question: who could realistically hold off Velzard to give Guy time to break through to her heart? Veldora is off elsewhere, and Velgrynd is on the front line against Ivarij and Cryptid's army. Testarossa doesn't have the strength to stall Velzard, nor does she have access to Rimuru's imaginary supply. This makes Chloe, who has been absent for a while, the most probable candidate to join Guy in battle against Velzard. What do you think? As for Testarossa, who is also headed to this battleground to save Carrera, it's likely she'll face interference from Jahil, since Jahil seems like the best choice on Feldway's side to create obstacles for her. But with Jahil's primary target being Luminous, there is some uncertainty. Testarossa has had relatively few scenes among the three primordial demon beauties, so it would make sense for Volume 22 to give her more focus. One more thing we can be fairly sure of is that Guy will probably appear in his female form. Personally, I think it's pretty cool to see Guy switching between battle and computation forms. This is an interesting setup, and Diablo has repeatedly hinted that he can also transform into a female to accompany Rimuru-sama. If that happens, we might eventually see 7 primordial demon beauties. Alright, that's all for this video. Since we mentioned Testarossa, I plan to dedicate the next episode to a complete character analysis of her. This time, unlike Primordial Yellow Carrera, I'll keep recaps brief and instead connect the story by focusing on the content we missed and Testarossa's unique personality traits and growth. The next episode is going to be just as exciting. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you in the next one.